Hold on.
Oh.
It says we are, and we are live.
Hello.
Excellent.
Good morning, everybody, or good day, good night, tomorrow, wherever you are. So it's good to be with you again. Still another week above ground. I'm still here.
Absolutely.
So
people are probably going to wonder why we're not wearing the same color like we usually do today. And so there's a reason. The madness shall be revealed. Yes. And our T-shirts are
Mrs. McCartney's wine.
And you can see a glass of it in the front there. Mrs. McCartney's wine.
Just having a vat of it just
to hydrate. Indeed.
To hydrate, exactly.
So tell the kids about our fabulous guest this week.
Our guest this week is Chef David Skinner from Texas, Kemah, Texas. And he's got a wonderful restaurant called Eculent, but he also has a winery called, what's it called?
Clear Creek.
Clear Creek, there you go. And see, it's hitting the spot already. And he actually manufactures Mrs. McCartney's wines from, from California grapes and Texas fruits. But he will tell you all about it. Ruth's going to drag him in from the green room.
Absolutely.
So do the honors, Ruth.
And we've no real need to talk about Texas fruits, have we?
No.
Sweetheart.
Oh, hello.
Anyway,
hello,
without further ado, the man of the moment, the Willy Wonka of food, all the way live from Texas. We are welcoming Chef David Skinner. Welcome,
Hello,
Chef.
David. Good morning.
Welcome. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good to see you.
You
folks,
too.
Peeps are jumping on from all over the place. We have Atlanta in the house, and Debbie is in the house. So the usual suspects are here, and Mark Lindsay.
Oh, Mark Lindsay, of course.
Who was one of your
one
of your frequent diner guests. So you go first, Ange, because she's the more. I know a lot of this stuff, so she's the more curious one.
So Ruth. Oh, hello. I'll start again, shall I? Should I go?
3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1, go.
3, 2, 1, go. Okay. Well, we met David Skinner through Barry Coffin in Texas. Barry is our music friend.
That's right.
And Barry has done some music on some of your projects, hasn't he? So
he has. Yep.
Yeah.
Tell the kids about, I mean, before we get into the 9-dimensional thing that Eculent is as a dining experience, one of the things that you've curated with Barry is a music soundtrack, correct?
We've done a couple of them so far.
Have you? Yeah.
Yeah. Every time we change the menu, we do a different soundtrack for for that menu. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We'll have to see if it can be included as a category into the Grammys.
Yes,
restaurant music. There you go.
Hey,
you never know. Yeah.
Exactly.
So tell our kids, how did Eculent come to be? You were on a plane to somewhere, and that beautiful mind of yours just exploded and went, aha! A light bulb went off, didn't it?
Yeah. So the idea for the restaurant came about on a trip to Beijing. And a very long, exhausting trip, but I had a really bad meal at the airport and had food on my mind, not really for the right reasons, but more so, why can't you get a decent meal at an airport? And that kind of led to what kind of restaurant has not been thought of or done before. And so that really led to Eculent. So on the way over, I couldn't come up with a restaurant that really hadn't been done. On the way back, I kept thinking about it and started to just kind of break down kind of all the attributes of a typical restaurant. And the thing that every restaurant has in common, regardless of if it's Japanese or Mexican or Peruvian or anything, steakhouse, is that the ambiance is static. So if you walk into a steakhouse, I guarantee you're gonna smell beef cooking. You're going to see probably some kind of red velvet, or at least red somewhere, dark booze, dark tables. It's just kind of what we're accustomed to. Same thing if you go to a Mexican restaurant. You're probably going to hear mariachi music and see a sombrero on the wall. And Charles Spence over in the UK has done a lot of work around really kind of understanding cues when it comes to food and different lighting and sounds and things like that. Really really delved into the sort of science side of why we enjoy food and what makes sense. And if you went to a Mexican restaurant and when you walked in, it looked like a Japanese restaurant, and if you heard Japanese music playing, your mind would immediately tell you you're in the wrong place. And
so would your palate, presumably, right? When
and
you
so
taste
your palate, right? Your palate
Yeah.
wouldn't understand. If they served enchiladas, your palate would just go, it doesn't make sense. Might even say tastes like fish when it's not.
Yeah.
But that's just kind of the way the mind works, and so it's all about cues and norms and things that you grow up with and you expect, right? And so my thought was, what if you could change that ambiance at a moment's notice? What if you could change the smell of the restaurant? What if you could change the lighting, the color, the intensity? What if the music was all matched both in tone and rhythm to the type of dish that you were trying to serve? What would that do? Would it make a difference? And what we found out, I mean, Eculent's been around. This is our 9th year. And what we discovered early on was it does make quite a difference, a dramatic difference. Now, the key is being able to do things more subtly than sort of overt. When we first opened, we were really still experimenting and trying to understand how all these things kind of come into play. And so early years, it was probably a little more clunky. Now we've got it down pat. We know kind of exactly, what to do to get a certain type of response. But early on, it was really funny. We had, before we even opened the restaurant, we had a meat producer, 44 Farms.
Oh, yeah.
And their salesperson came in and I'd asked him, I said, bring me a bunch of different cuts that you have that maybe, it's hard to sell to restaurants or whatever. And we're going to kind of see what we can do with them. So he showed up with this big box of beef that was all cryovac. It was all fresh. Nothing had been cooked. And I just wanted to see what I could kind of do to mess with their minds. And it was the salesperson and kind of this trainee that he had with him. And so it just so happened I'd already loaded the scent generator with barbecue smell. And so I just kind of, unbeknownst to them, turned the scent generator on in the restaurant. And, they're pulling all the meat out and kind of laying it on the table and tell me about the different cuts and things. And and when they walked in, there was no smell, right? But when they opened the box, that's kind of when I hit the scent generator. And as they started to take the different cuts of meat out, the guy that was his helper kept looking at the meat and kind of looking at him, and they'd look at me, and he was like, "Did we cook this? How long do you think what's going on? Why does it smell like this is all cooked?" And the guy, the salesman, Josh, he was kind of the same way. He had this kind of RCA dog look on his face, and all of a sudden I just burst into laughing, and I'm like, "I'm just playing a trick on you." I said, "But you proved the point that smells can really influence, even what you're seeing." And
we were talking about this the other day when you check in a certain, I think it's either Hyatt's or Hilton's, they have chocolate chip cookies and cinnamon rolls baking in a little thing so immediately you've come in from an airport off a stressy journey, you're tired, and there's that warm cookie, and they hand you a warm cookie, but it's the smell that hits you first.
It's the smell that gets you first.
You just immediately, and let you know it's going to be a good night's sleep. You're in love with the brand. You don't care if something goes wrong because you're at home, right? It's like baking bread.
And I can't remember if it was Hyatt or Hilton, but one of them actually does scent branding. So you can buy the smell of the hotel if you want. They sell it in candles.
Really?
Yeah, Abercrombie and Fitch does it for Hyatt, I think. Yeah. And some of the banks, like Chase Bank, now have it's almost like a cinnamon and ground coffee smell.
hmm Well, and you know, if you talk to a realtor, they always tell you if you want to sell your house, bake an apple pie or some cookies, you
Yes.
know,
Yep.
and leave it.
Oh,
And
yes.
it's because when you walk in, it reminds you of home or grandmother or whatever, right? I mean, that's what immediately gets triggered in your mind. So
Mm, mm.
smell is
So
extremely powerful. It's probably the most powerful of all the senses. You can you'll recall memories quicker with smell than with sight
Really.
or sound or taste. Mhm.
I can remember childhood smells. I can remember an underground railway station in Liverpool from when I was just,
5 years old, maybe.
yeah, 5, 6, 7 years older.
Wet concrete, newspaper, and diesel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Funny. So you just touched on. I just threw barbecue in the scent generator. Please, in God's name, what is a scent? I know there's a gentleman called. It's a name like Neil Patrick Harris or something that you found that creates. What is it? And how does it work?
Yeah. So when I started thinking about the restaurant, I really went looking for, you know, who's kind of a leader in the field of kind of each of these senses, right? And came across a person actually out in LA in your neck of the woods that did Katy Perry's concert where she wanted the whole arena to smell like bubble gum, you know, for her song, and this guy did it, and his
That's a
name
big job.
is Neil Harris, not Neil Patrick Harris, but Neil Harris. And I worked with him for a very long time, coming up with different smells, and he's kind of like an industrial perfumer.
Okay.
So you know, if you need, you know, candle
Gallons,
smells, and
gallons
he
of
would
cinnamon.
do the thing he always told me was he goes, don't order anything in September because I can't make anything for you, because that's the month they do all their haunted house smells. So he's like, everything that you can imagine that's nasty and putrid.
How does a
in
haunted
November.
house smell?
Well, like
Yeah.
old rat poop, which is
Yeah.
not what
Yeah,
you don't
poop
you
and
don't want
vomit
your
and asphalt. You know, asphaltenes are really good for, but it's surprising because asphaltenes work really well in some food smells that, you know, you just can't have too much. Anyway, so I worked with him for a long time. We built kind of our own systems at Eculent to you know, put the smell in the air. But we discovered along the way that there's different ways to do it. You don't have to use something that's kind of you know, electronic scent generator. We do one of the easiest things that we have is it's a course that's been on the menu since really day one. It's called Out of the Forest, and we bring out this large cloche. It's probably, you know, a foot and a half tall. Inside that, we've created this forest scene. And the dish is really almost 100% mushrooms. There's 7 different mushrooms in there. We take all the greens and sublimate them so that they're nice and crispy, but not fried or dried. And then there's 2 different soils in the bottom. One's made with black truffle, and the other's beets, pistachios, and black olives. And we give them a fork that's scented to the forest floor, and we get that scent basically from distilling potting soil. And potting soil's got kind of amazing qualities. If you ever go work in the garden, I mean, it just immediately makes you think of, you know, fresh dirt and all that. And you know, a lot of people try and capture, you know, that smell of, you know, first rain, you know.
Yep.
And so it's got a little bit of that in it, a little bit of pecora. And so so basically we distill that in small batches and then put it on a little tablet on this fork. And so every time somebody takes a bite and they get that smell, it immediately makes them think they're in a forest. And of course we set all the lighting to green and dark, and I've had people literally kind of come to tears, you know, with that dish, because they're like, you know, I immediately went back to my, you know, youth and my dad and I going and foraging for mushrooms in the forest and things like that. And so it's really kind of amazing how you can do things. But sometimes it's put the smell just in the air. Sometimes it's put it on an item that they pick up and use. Sometimes it's just put it inside the dish itself, so that it really kind of comes out and permeates, And early on, we had to learn about, how much do you put out? Do you put it out before the dish, during the dish, after the dish? Is it the same smell that's in the dish that you're trying to reinforce, or is it something completely complementary? We also discovered that certain allergies that people may have, like if they're allergic to alum, so garlic and onions, we could actually put an alum smell into the air, which wouldn't trigger their allergy, but would kind of fill in the flavor notes of the dish.
Wow.
Oh my
there's
goodness.
there's all kinds of kind of fun and interesting things you can do, and cooking is really just science and chemistry. So,
and how long do you have to how long do you have to allow in between courses for not just the scent and the air, but the palate to clear? And I assume you have to suck the air out of the room and recondition it, and then start with the next course. How does that work?
To a certain degree, and that's why we moved away from a lot of times just kind of flooding the room with a different smell. We'll put it on a fork or a spoon, or we'll have it embedded more in the meal in a different way. Like the cloche, we fill it full of smoke. And so when we open the cloche up, the smoke comes out, and it only lasts for, maybe a minute, and then it goes away. So it's probably as much art as it is science when it comes to, to figuring out the kind of the mechanisms for deploying the smell and how long, and you also have to be careful, because there are some scents that just don't want to go away. They linger, and we discovered that too. It's like, oh, don't, it's a great smell, but it doesn't dissipate. It just stays, and then you got to look at, is it alcohol based? Is it water based? Is it oil based?
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. And that's just one scent. That's just smell. And then you've got taste and sound and everything else. And that was where Barry came in,
Yes.
And early on, Barry was really instrumental in helping me kind of think through different music. And in essence, it's a completely choreographed, orchestrated, set of music for the courses, because there's some things that you want to be sort of upbeat and lively. So you want kind of a different tone and tempo. There's other things that you want kind of more somber, depending on the feeling that you're wanting to bring across with the food. And that's kind of what we always try and do is, how do we increase the level of emotion in a dish with different impacts on your senses.
Yeah. So, I mean, how did you first, once you had this idea on the way home from Beijing, how long was that between the thought on a yellow pad and, how many years did it take you to actually opening the door?
Probably 3 or 4 years, something like that.
That's all? Because it sounds like a decade journey, at least to me.
Yeah.
Because in Hollywood, it takes 20 years to make a movie, and I'm surprised that in 3 or 4 years you could do all of that olfactory research. Do I get extra points for olfactory? It's good.
Yes, you do get extra points.
And then sourcing the because I know your first menu concept was Eculent was the middle of the bullseye, and then it was a distance, and now you're going through time, and then with the next restaurant that we'll talk to about shortly, you're going all the way back to pre-colonialism. So once you got the idea for, okay, I have to do something different, and it's going to involve music and scent and all of these other light and sound and all of these other senses, where on earth do you start to develop a menu and find premises?
Well, part
And,
of it is,
and did Kristen think you were out of your mind?
Oh, inevitably.
course.
Of course.
She probably still does.
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't.
I'm
Oh,
sure.
yeah, she still does. And not only did she think I was out of my mind, she thought, "Oh, this will be, a fun experiment for 6 months, and then I'll be tired of
Yeah,
it
and you'd be tired of
and
it.
and go
Shiny,
back to a real job."
shiny new
Um,
toy next.
yeah, exactly. Luckily, I'm a pretty quick study and pretty good at Google searching. So I just went out and looked for kind of who was doing something in that field, and then kind of read everything that they wrote, and a lot of them just called them up, talked to them, sent them emails. Um, Most everybody's pretty open about trying to, especially typical researchers are more than happy to share their knowledge when they think they'll get some other publication out of it, things like that.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
Right.
um,
I mean, did
but
it involve a lot of food trips, or
food trips? Of course, I spent 30 years traveling the world, so I I had a pretty good basis for a lot of things already, and that was probably the biggest perk I had from being a consultant and working in the oil and gas industry for so long was just the amount of places I was able to go and visit and different food I could eat and so forth. It was a great long-term education. So
I'm prompted to ask, what was your first interest in food? Was it family, your mother, your grandmother?
Yeah, my grandmother. I was about 4, and I asked her. She was a pastry chef, and I asked her. I said, "Would you please make me a carousel cake?" And she thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
But you know how grandmas are. They're like, "Okay, sure. Let me see what I can do." And sure enough, she made me a little carousel cake. She didn't quite get all the theatrics down where the horses went up and down on the pole and it rotated and things like that. But had I been doing it, now that's what we would do, and the whole thing would be edible. But nevertheless, it set me on kind of a journey where it's like anything's possible, and anything's possible with food. You just have to sort of dream it and then figure out a way to make it happen. But yeah, so I started. I mean, that was probably, like I said, that was my fourth birthday, and then I was about 8. She gave me a Sabatier chef's knife and Julia Child's cookbook, and said, "Here you go. Get started. Why don't you make dinner every Sunday?" And so there were a lot of interesting dinners at our house on Sunday.
From an 8-year-old, yes, with a
Yes.
sharp knife.
Yeah, exactly. And and so I just I love doing it. And then she had a gourmet store, and when I was 16, I told her, I was like, someday I want to have a restaurant and be a chef. And she was like, "Well, what are you waiting on? Why don't you just take some space in the back of the store and make yourself a little restaurant?" So I did. My first restaurant was called La Vie en Rose, after the Edith Piaf song. It was French. It was all, charcuterie and sandwiches and like a little French bistro. And I would open it up, after school. Typically it's kind of like Eculent now. I guess I've kind of gone back to that. Typically it was open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
Right.
And Saturday we would do lunch and dinner, and then Thursday and Friday was just dinner. But had enough space for about 30 people, and quickly kind of caught on. Yeah, and so it was great. It was myself and my grandmother, my grandfather, and occasionally I'd rope in my mother and sister, and eventually it got to where we were hiring people to work there full time, and eventually my grandmother just opened it up for lunch every day that the store was open. So it was a 6-day-a-week venture. And then I went to college and started my second restaurant called Christopher's. which
Which
was
is your middle name, right?
in my middle name. Yeah. Which was a farm to table restaurant, but not, at the time, nobody had coined the term farm to table. It was just kind of this is how we cook. This is how we eat. I mean, I grew up with, we always had gardens. We always ate out of the gardens. My grandmother was kind of a canning zealot. So, I mean, nothing ever went to waste in the garden, and we'd be canning all summer. And then the winter, she'd be like, we need some green beans, go down the cellar and get some. And so I did. And I honestly, growing up, didn't realize that canned food was not a mason jar. It was actually in a can.
Yeah, right. And now is this the Choctaw side of your family or the other side of the family?
The other side.
The other side. Okay.
Yeah. And so I would just go down and go down in the cellar and grab whatever. But those were great memories. I remember standing in the kitchen with her and it's like, well, here's how a jar is sealed, and here's how it's not, and
Popped.
all that, and sterilizing the jars, and making pickles in the summer and all that. So it was just this is how we did it. And we had friends that were ranchers, and so we get a whole half a cow or whatever, a couple times a year, and you fill up the freezer. And I mean, it's just like, okay, that's how you get. I mean, we would go to the grocery store, but typically it was for salt and soap and
ketchup.
Ketchup, stuff like that. And but we hardly ever bought anything
store-bought food.
No, just
well, it would have been the same for you growing up in World War II, right? Absolutely. Wasn't there a dig for victory thing?
Oh yes, we all used to. They used to have little plots here and there. I lived in a row of council houses with a very small back garden, but there were areas that were
allotments. Right?
Allotments they call them. You were allotted a piece of ground. So my mother was ace at growing cabbages. That's what I remember. Probably why I love cabbage so much. Yeah. Sometimes at night, Ruth will say to me, "What do you want for dinner?" I say, "Mashed potatoes and cabbage."
Steamed cabbage.
And
Colkennon, they call it in Ireland.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Brings you back home.
That's right.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. So from there, approximately what year did you open Christopher's? Is it the 80s?
Let's see. That would have been like 1984, 4 or 5, something like that. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And then you just did a complete 180 side diversion, went off and had a brainiac consulting industry in oil and gas, right? A whole career, 20 years of career. Yeah.
It was a little different. I credit my mother with making me go to college, because at the time, I'm in high school, I'm making good money, the restaurant's doing great, it was like, and you're 16, 17, 18 years old, and you're like, hey, I'm making plenty of money and I'm doing what I want. Why do I want to go to college?
Yeah.
And my mother was like, you're going to college, whether you like it or not. And you're not going to go get a culinary degree, because we already know you can cook. So you don't need to go and learn that. I'm not going to waste, my money and your time on that. You need to go find something else. So I went and got degrees in business and finance, and then went on and got masters and so forth. And so, and it was kind of nice. I made sure I timed the expiry of the lease of the restaurant to when I was going to graduate, and then that way I could, decide, do I want to keep on doing this or do something else? And I'm kind of like, well, I worked my butt off for 5 years and I spent all this money getting an education. Maybe I should go see what, I can do with it, and start out trading commodities, and then eventually went to work for Conoco, and worked for a great guy. His name was Tom Science. He was the head of the research department. He came in from DuPont. Yeah, what a name. we called him the Oracle because literally there was nothing this guy didn't know, and it wasn't just bullshit. I mean, he knew
Right.
it. You could ask him any kind of technical question, and it's just like he'd draw it on the board for you, and it's
So,
like
so basically, what you're telling me is he is actually with the treadle and the typewriter. He is the guy behind ChatGPT, right? It's Tom.
probably it's probably what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably, yeah.
And Tom's fingers are worn to the bone right now.
Yeah. And so anyway, I spent about a decade with Conoco, traveled the world, and probably would have still stayed there for a while, but they had a plane crash and then a reorganization, and oil and gas kind of went down, and I was like, maybe this isn't quite what I want to keep doing, and so I asked for a sabbatical, and they gave me 6 months to go see what I wanted to do. And basically, I took the skills I had, went out and started a consulting firm, and all my clients tend to be friends from oil and gas from other companies, including Conoco. And next thing I know, I built kind of one of the largest private consulting firms in oil and gas in the world. We had offices all over, and did that until 2010, and I was just kind of ready for something different. Started an oil field service company with Michael Dell's private equity group, and the goal was to take produced water from oil and gas wells, turn it back into potable water that we could use for agriculture, irrigation, and eventually drinking, and that business did pretty well, but kind of got tired of that, and my wife's like, so what are you going to do now? And that was 2014, and I was about to turn 50. Yeah. And I was like, I have this crazy idea for a restaurant. And as soon as I said that, she's like, well, any idea?
Oh, here we go again. Yeah.
I have this crazy idea. And it's like, I don't really have to do anything right now. I'm not going to retire. I'll never retire because I just can't. But I don't actually have to go work for a living. So why don't we try and do something a little fun and different? And like I said, she's kind of like, well, go do that and you see what that's like. And I know in her mind, she was like, oh, 6 months, he'll be tired of this. And that'll be it. It'll be done. And then she was like, and then what are you going to do? Start another consulting firm? I'm like, well, that's an easy thing. I can always start another consulting firm. And
wow.
Yeah. And the first year was probably the worst, because what we do is so different. And the whole idea for the restaurant was throw out everything you know about a restaurant and start over and just build it from the ground up the way you want and what you think it should be based on what you're trying to do. And
well, and back in those days, I mean, it's not that long ago, but there wasn't people didn't really know about molecular gastronomy. If they'd heard of El Bulli and the Adria brothers, they were 1/10 of 1% of the people of the world. Oh, yeah. There wasn't really gastronomic experiential dining in those days.
Well, there wasn't much. I mean, El Bulli was kind of the mecca for that, and then the chefs that came out of there did spin-offs of things, but there wasn't a whole lot. And
but it kind of went a lot of that. You'll pardon me. I'm a huge El Bulli fan, but some of the kids that came out of there just kind of took it to a silly, poached air on a bed of Danish seafoam. Okay. It kind of went a little off the rails.
Some people take it a little too far. My rule has always been, if it doesn't taste good, we just don't serve it. And there's plenty of restaurants I've been to that do molecular gastronomy, all over the world. And sometimes the dish is just for effect, right? It's got some great theatrics to it, but when you try it, you're like, would I eat that again? No, I wouldn't.
Right.
And so we kind of start with it has to taste good. If it doesn't taste good, we're not going to serve it.
Right.
And then you kind of add on to that, so it's you want to use any of sort of the atmospherics or the theatrical tricks, you might say, to enhance the dish. If that's all the dish is about, then it'll fall flat, and it's not.
Right.
It's not.
Right. Well, and again, Mark Cave, our friend from Fave Me, is on, and word of mouth or word of mouse, as I can say, unless you have the taste, ultimately what people come for, because they come and they're hungry. Yes, they want an experience and they want all the things you provide, but they can go away and say the food is crap, and then it was all for nothing, right? So. Right. You really need, and plus, little did you know when you were doing your oil and gas consulting businesses, you were actually building a Rolodex and a fan base, which is why you've got thousands of people on your waiting list.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Right. So, but again, these are the kind of people who can go to any restaurant in the world, any Michelin star anywhere. And so it has to hold up to those. When do we think Michelin is going to actually put Texas on the map? Wouldn't that be so many amazing restaurants, not just in Texas, but in Houston, like where you are in Kemah. It's amazing to me that, I would argue, obviously, Vegas is one of the best food towns in the world because all the chefs are there. It's kind of a gathering point. But I would argue that the Houston food scene is better than LA, San Francisco. Mm-hmm. It's more diverse.
I think so, for sure.
I think it'd be my number one eating pick in America. Certainly, obviously, it's different if you're going to Spain.
Houston is probably the most culturally diverse city in the U.S. And it gets overlooked all the time. But we're a true melting pot, and there's really probably not any cuisine that you can't find in Houston. I can't think of any,
Right.
Which makes me think of your around the world in
10,000 bites.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So Eculent's up and running as if he hasn't got enough to do. He then opens a bed and breakfast, the Clipper House Inn, and Clear Creek Winery, which people are, Debbie's commenting, I can't get over you two not matching, but Debbie, we are actually wearing matching.
They are matching.
We are matching. It's just not the color.
And it's made in David's Winery.
Yeah. So tell the kids the story when we went down there to do the McCartney dinner, and we're like, what's that tall building?
Oh, yes. Ruth said, what's that other building? We said, oh, that's my winery. And she said, what? Winery? We've been here 5 days, and I didn't know you had the keys to a winery. When the rest
there was a reason for that, because I wouldn't have a winery if you'd gotten in it sooner.
You knew what you were doing, exactly. I'll drink to that. Yeah. So that ultimately led to a visit, plus a conversation, and dinner
with the McCartneys. And
I know.
A generous donation from chef to the Linda McCartney.
Which I just put on Facebook. I think it was yesterday or today. Popped up in my memories thing on Facebook. 6 years ago.
Yes, really.
That was when we. I don't remember if that was the first one or the second one, but it popped up, and so
great. So Debbie
gets
it now.
That was great. We need to do that again.
We need to do a dinner with the McCartneys again. Yeah. We have a very special VIP viewer all the way from Oklahoma saying, "Hey, Dad."
Hi, Mackenzie.
Hi, Mackenzie.
Hi, Mackenzie. Hello, sweetheart.
Yeah,
that's my daughter.
Keeping tabs on your dad. Good girl.
Good girl. Yeah, she's got her eye on you. Yeah, she knows he's crazy.
Well, I have.
So I know you do. So as if that's not enough, he's running Eculent and a winery and the bed and breakfast, and then he calls me one day and says, "I've had this idea to do this dinner from 101 courses from 10 countries around the world. It's 10 courses per country, and I'm going to fly all these 43 chefs in from around the world, and we're going to do it at the Houston Natural History Museum in the Dinosaur Hall." And I'm like, okay, of course you are.
Of course you are. It's David's dinner.
And when are we doing it? He's like, in the middle of hurricane season. I'm like, well,
why not?
Why not?
That was truly incredible. We have to do that again too.
It was. Yeah, that's the plan. We were planning to do one, and then COVID happened. And of course, nothing's really gone on for the last few years. And
right.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping maybe this fall we'll be able to put that on again. We actually had a really great plan for the next one, which was going to like blow away the 10,000 bites, and we were going to have something on the order of 50,000 bites.
Oh,
Yeah. So
give
more
us at
chefs,
least
more
months notice. Yeah.
more people. Still do it at the museum, but make it where you walk around. You could do things in the different exhibit halls, and so we're trying to see if we can't make that happen this year. I hope we can.
Right.
But I think everybody kind of keeps holding their breath, going, no more lockdown, no more craziness from COVID.
We've got to get on with living. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to get on with living. And in fact, the California, as of today, the 28th of February, 2023, the California statewide COVID emergency ends at midnight today. So that's worth it too.
Congratulations. Yes.
Cheers.
That's really good.
We're allowed to go outdoors again now.
Yeah.
Woo! So, and as if that wasn't enough, then you went on one of your food trips to Spain and went to a distillery, and then came home and said, I'm going to start being I'm going to run a distillery. I'm going to open Meticulous.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me that crazy story.
Yeah, that's the newest kind of venture. And I went to there you go. You got a bottle. Mm-hmm.
And look, there's still some gin in it.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm surprised it's not empty.
And
or has Angie had it all and it's just water in there? She's just tricking you.
that's right. Yeah.
I don't know. She's the gin drinker.
Yeah. So I went to Spain on a food trip and ended up at Gin Marais, which is a really great distillery right outside of Barcelona, and the gin was just absolutely fantastic and very different than any I'd ever had before, because it's got a real buttery mouthfeel. It almost tastes like you're just drinking a martini out of the bottle. And so I asked the guy, I'm like, so where do you make, how many cases do you do? He's like, oh, we do 80,000 cases a year. And I was like, well, where do you make it? And he's like, in this little building you're standing in. I mean, literally it was an old chapel that was down on the beach. They took it apart and brought it back up the hill and put it on the site.
As you do. Of course you do.
And I'm thinking this must be some kind of divine intervention, because there's no way you can make 80,000 cases in this little tiny chapel that was maybe like 20 by 20. I mean, it was just this tiny building. And there were two pot stills in there. There was a 100-gallon and a 25-gallon pot still. And I'm like, you got to walk me through this because I can't figure this out. And he's like, oh, it's very simple. He goes, and the day I was there was the only day they don't distill. And it's their one day off, which is, I think it was a Monday. But 6 days a week they're running the stills. And he's like, well, we have, I think it was like 11 botanicals. And so we run these, in this series each day. And then we compound the gin. So we bring in this wheat, neutral wheat spirit from France. And basically, so all they're doing are using those stills to create the essences of the gin, and then they add it to the neutral spirit.
Wow.
And I'm looking at, I'm going, you do 80,000 cases out of a 20 by 20. That just blew my mind. I'm like, well, I can do that, So
yeah.
So I came home because I had imagined, this huge warehouse and
sure,
stills everywhere and all this. And he was like, no, that's not how we do it. So I came home and I was like, well, guess what? We're gonna start a distillery. And the thing that makes us kind of unique is we do everything from grape, because we already have the winery. And I didn't want to go in and try and do all the solids handling you have to do with grains. So our vodka is made from wine. It's made from grape.
Wow.
Which there's a couple others that do. Ciroc is probably the most famous one, and they make theirs from wine also. But we already had the winery going. We already knew how to make wine. It's like, well, then let's just take that product and turn it into the next thing. So we distill the wine, turn it into vodka, which is really fantastic vodka.
Very
and
small.
then turn the vodka into gin. And the other thing we do is we make rum. We make some really fantastic silver and dark aged rum. That we don't make from grape. We make that from sugarcane. But similar process, and again, no crazy solid handling, because
Right.
that's the problem with any of it is the solids
The
handling
mash.
and disposal, the mash, yeah, and all that. So we make it from things that basically we don't really generate much mash. And so that's been going really well. We're expanding across the state. At some point we'll expand nationwide, but really just launched the brand about a year ago.
And you have a fantastic logo. I wonder which
amazing. Yeah, where'd that logo come from? Yeah, so Ruth definitely helped with that, and we used a great designer. The labels are all metal. They're made in the UK, yeah. It's a very unique brand, and the idea was to create a brand that would be like Eculent and really attack your senses. So, the label is embossed metal, so it's got a tactile feel. We've been working on a way to create a scratch and sniff label so that you actually can scratch the label and know kind of the floral arrangement inside the bottle, especially when it comes to the gins. And we've been working on an app where you can scan the bottle and take you to different locations around the world, and get a little history tour and so forth. So yeah, it's meticulous society, a lot of fun, a lot of learning.
The Meticulous Society, which is now that COVID is eased up in the UK, our crazy ambassador Lord Alistair Popplewell will be out and amongst the English, as we say, out and about. So follow Lord Popplewell on Instagram, and you'll see his posts.
You'll start to see it. Yeah,
fabulous posts of places, and he'll be introducing meticulous spirits to the wider world outside of
coronation. Yeah, yes.
During coronation,
absolutely.
We should actually, the royal family love gin. We should try and find a way to get them a bottle to congratulate King Charles. Because if you send something, you will get a thank you letter, and you could frame that on the wall at Eculent.
That's true. That's true. That would be quite cool.
Well, I'll research that for you, because I have friends in low places that know about these things.
There you go. You should definitely do that. Yeah, that would be kind of cool. A lot of fun.
Okay. Yeah. And here's Devin, our director of 10,000 Bites. Devin says Eculent is one of a kind experience, and we would agree. So speaking of as if you haven't got enough to do, talk to us about the Preserve at Eculent, which is opening in your other space at 709 Harris Avenue. And how did you meet Chef G and Graham and Street to Kitchen and all of that, and where did that crazy idea come from?
Yeah, so the newest restaurant is going to be called the Preserve. It has kind of two meanings behind it. One is a way to preserve our history, and it's an indigenous restaurant. So my background, I'm a member of the Choctaw Nation, and so wanted to do something. Eculent, we do probably about a half a dozen courses that are all kind of Native American based. So we buy a lot of indigenous ingredients from different tribes around the country, and we try and tell the story of Native Americans and their life and their struggles and so forth. And so I kind of got this idea to do a restaurant that was completely completely focused on just that. So and
the ingredients would all have to be pre-colonial, and there's
no
hot sauce on the table.
No. And anyway, Chef G, as she's affectionately called, but her real name is Benchuan, painter, who just got a James Beard nomination for Best Chef. Yeah. Her and her husband run a restaurant called Street to Kitchen. And I met them originally at the Truffle Master competition, which, by the way, we're doing next Monday.
March 6th.
March 6th. And
at the Revere, I think, at the Revere on Katy Road. Yes.
Yes. And anyway, that's where I first met them, and they were just really nice people. Kind of are kindred souls, you might say. And so I literally started eating at the restaurant all the time when I would go to Houston. And people always ask me, it's like, well, where would you go to eat? And I'm like, I never really tell anybody where I would go eat necessarily, because I have so many friends that are chefs, and it's like, you don't really want to tell one over the other.
No.
Anyway, I go eat. The first time I went to the restaurant, I thought I was in the wrong place, because literally I pulled up to a Valero gas station, and I'm like, this can't be the restaurant. But sure enough, it was right there in the gas station. And their food is just, absolutely, phenomenal. And it's real Thai. It's not Americanized Thai. It's true Thai. And anyway, one day we were just talking, and they were like, someday we'd really like to open another restaurant. And I'm like, I had this kind of crazy idea. And the more we talked about, the more I was like, wait a minute, that's not so crazy. And the thing that most people don't understand, or maybe I've never even thought, I mean, everybody thinks Thai food is hot and spicy. That's what you immediately think of. And I hear people, it's like, oh, Thai, well, I can't eat that. It's too hot, Well, all the chilies and actually all the things that you think of as modern Thai food were brought through the spice trade, from the Portuguese. And it's literally a recent phenomenon. I mean, recent being the last 500 years. But before that, they ate basically just like Native Americans. Same cooking techniques, same ingredients for the most part. And so as we started to talk about, okay, look at all these similarities, this idea kind of came, I think, to both of us that we should do a restaurant that's focused on indigenous cooking. And so the preserve, the two meanings are, one, how do you preserve your sort of history and bring that forward to people? But the other is focused on preservation techniques that were used by Native Americans and Native Thai people, 500 plus years ago. And so we've been able to go back and find recipes and food ingredients and things that, we're starting at, basically around the time of Jesus and going forward. And
so would they have, in those days, would they have had fermenting and pickling or equivalent?
Yeah. So the oldest kind of techniques would have been fermenting, pickling. Pickling kind of came along after fermentation, but fermentation was one of the earliest things. Smoking, drying, confying, storing it in fat, simple, curing techniques with salt and things. I mean, salt, back even just a few hundred years ago was more valuable than gold.
Well, that's as I understand it, that's where the word salary comes from. You get paid as a salary because it comes from
salt. It's worth his salt.
Yeah. Oh, well, she's worth her salt.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be able to feature all those different cooking techniques, but then we'll also be featuring basically pre-colonialism ingredients. Now, the one thing we are going to do is take it up to kind of modern day. So the menu is going to be designed like a timeline. So you're going to start, a few thousand years ago, and we kind of work our way forward. Again, my rule is the food has to be delicious. So it's still going to taste really good, but you're going to get a lot of ingredients, especially in the first part of the menu, that are all pre-colonial. And kind of what that means is, so in the US, it's going to be based on, corn and bison
Squash.
and rabbits and squash, and the three sisters of every indigenous person in the U.S. was corn, squash, and beans.
Right.
And the reason for that was they would grow them together. So the corn stalk provided the vehicle for the beans to kind of latch onto and grow up. The squash provided ground cover to keep the weeds down and keep the moisture in the soil. Yeah. And so they used to grow all three together, and so they're called the Three Sisters.
Right.
And we've been doing a Three Sister dish at Eculent for like the last 3 or 4 years. So we change it up, but it's that kind of progression. And so the focus is going to be on educating the guests on this is what food was like, and it regardless of whether you were in North America or you were in Thailand, the techniques that were used for the most part were the same, and much of the ingredients were the same, but all the new sort of new modern Thai with chilies, and it's hot and it's spicy, and curries and things like those are all new, recent, and as the chilies came from South America, a lot of the curries and spices also came from South America, but also India and other places. And you think about the spice route, and the Portuguese and the Dutch, and the Portuguese mostly for Thailand, but the Dutch and others. And then everybody thinks about noodles. Noodles came from China. I mean, it's
the Dutch East India Company is still the oldest registered company in the world, because they sailed from Holland to Indonesia and all of that, and they through the Caribbean, and they brought nutmeg and spices and so on.
Everything.
And so forth. So I can't wait to see what you three come up with, and hopefully you'll all come back on the show when Preserve is either open or pre-opening.
Absolutely.
But so basically you're starting with the menu ingredients basically when Ange was born, and now you're bringing it.
Thank you for that.
3,000 years ago. No, I'm kidding.
Maybe a little before her time.
But we do not want to forget, however, in closing, about your latest accolade, the second year in a row that Eculent has been awarded the Grand Champion First Prize of the Outstanding Showmanship Award at the Houston Rodeo. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll give my sister credit for that.
Oh, absolutely.
She's definitely the prop master. I'll come up and say, okay, here's what I think we're going to do food wise, and then we'll talk about a kind of a theme, and then next thing I know, she's like, well, I've got these columns, and what if we did this? And this year she was like, well, I got this bicycle. What if we had corn coming out of the end of the bicycle with a flame? And I'm like, they won't allow us to have any flames. And she's like, oh, we'll just use a fake flame, So yeah.
And P.S. we must have a spinning cow while we're at it.
And a spinning cow, yes.
Yes. I couldn't believe it when I saw that film. It was wonderful.
Yeah, I know. It was pretty funny.
Has to be.
Yeah. And thank you.
Last year we did it was kind of funny. We did an ice cream cone, but it wasn't ice cream. It was beef bourguignon, but looked like ice cream, and we did an onion foam on top, so it really looked like an ice cream cone. And so we made this kind of ice cream, trolley thing and all that, and we had people coming by. And it's like, are you the ice cream place? And I'm like, well, maybe we are. But what we didn't know was there was an actual ice cream company that was there that did barbecue flavored ice cream. So it was really funny. Yeah, it was really funny. So they had actual barbecue ice cream, and we had something that looks like ice cream, but it was not. It was
just amazing. Yeah, no, the Best Bites thing is quite a thing. And big thank you to Sherry Sigari from Lulu and Ruby. She took some great photos and videos, which really help
Yeah,
us
she
out
helped out a lot this year. Yeah.
on social media.
Yeah,
So
because there's like 5,000. I think this year they had 5,600 people that showed up for this, and we did 2,000 servings in like maybe 2 hours. I mean, it's a madhouse. I mean, you'll have people
did,
50 deep,
shrimp and corn butter, right, this year?
shrimp and corn butter. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Making me hungry now.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thanks, kids, for tuning in for Chef David Skinner. You will have been seeing and go across the crawl at the bottom, eculent.com. Get on the waiting list. It's long, but you might know someone who knows someone to be able to jump that list.
Yeah.
Mark Lindsay says he's available for pre-tastings for the preserve, by the way.
Is he? Okay, good. That's good.
So just don't get it in your beard, Mark. That's all.
That's right.
But, as one of our very special guests, we have, of course, written you your thank you limerick. So,
okay.
Indeed.
Yes.
And after 1, 2, 3, in saying our thanks to Chef Skinner, whose culinary skills are a winner, it's a pleasure to dine and to sip his fine wine. But with David, we'll never grow thinner.
Ta-da!
That's good. Me either.
Thank you,
I don't seem
David.
to grow
God
thinner
bless.
either.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And everybody check out all of the URLs across the bottom, eculent.com, meticulousspirits.com, around the world in 10,000 bites.com, and or just
And the new
Google,
preserve.
and the new preserve, which is a website coming soon, and or just Google the Willy Wonka of food. You'll find him also on McCartneystudios.com on our culinary talent page. If there's any talent spotters out there looking for judges or creators for culinary food programs out there in Hollywood, hello, we can put you in touch with them. So thank you so much for hanging out with us today, kids. And we'll see you all very, very soon.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you.